right, guys, good morning to this side. Now, good morning to this side as well. There we go. Welcome to Life Community Church. My name is Kyle. I'm one of the pastors here, and I love donuts. I don't know what it is, but it's, it's sweet, but there's something about taking a cake and putting more sugar on it and then deep frying it. It's like heaven on earth. It's like, Oh, hang on. I got my COVID-19. It's right here. Oh, it's good. And I don't know what it is. Like, it's like the moment you eat it, your mouth is like, whoa! And then like for like the 5 minutes afterwards, like, you feel so good. And then 15 minutes later, you're like, I need a nap or an intervention. It's like when I eat In-N-Out, I love it, and then I'm like, I'm sweating it all out. Like, there's this moment where it feels so good for a few minutes, and then I feel so yuck afterwards. You been there? And I say that, and I think, as I've been thinking about the sermon this week and the passage that we're studying, it makes me think that maybe, just maybe, complaining, whining, and grumbling is like eating a donut. For one moment, it feels so good. And then a few minutes later, you just feel yucky. So I should put this down so I can preach. It's interesting. I knew I was going to use this as an illustration this week, and so I went and got donuts from the donut shop. I went and got donuts from the donut shop so I can make the video that goes out every week. If you don't get the weekly videos, just scan the QR code. We'd love to keep you informed of what's going on. And I went and ordered one donut, and like, oh, okay. Then I ordered a second donut, and the lady said, "These aren't both for you, are they?" You're food shaming your customers. I'd be like me saying, "You're not coming to church, are you?" Like, what kind of customer service is that? And so I came back and I made the video for the email, and then I had a bite of one and a bite of another, and I ate both of them. And even though I knew the big idea of the illustration was it feels good for a second and then you feel miserable afterwards, I still ate not one, but both donuts. And my team for the rest of Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was, it all just a blur of like, wow. They're like, "Are you okay?" They're like, "Oh my gosh, she needs to get checked for COVID." I'm like, "It's not COVID, it's donuts, I promise." Oh. That joke didn't go well. Let's keep moving. And even though I knew it was going to happen, I did it anyway. Which makes me wonder, if grumbling, complaining, whining is the same thing, that it makes you feel good for 1 minute and then you feel yucky afterwards, why do I keep doing it? And then I started thinking about it, and I realized that for the moment that I complain about something, for that one moment, I feel so smart because I get to see all the problems in the world. I get to complain about politicians like, if I was doing it, and I feel so powerful. Or it's that time after the meeting. Have you ever been in the meeting after the meeting? Okay, half of you, let me explain how the meeting after the meeting works. The meeting is when you go and you just talk about it. The meeting after the meeting is when you go and talk about all the things that happened in the meeting, and the meeting after the meeting is always about the bad things from the meeting before and the bad person in the meeting before. And if I was running the meeting, and if I was running the team, I would do it that way. And for that moment, I feel like I see how the world's supposed to work. And I don't know if you've heard this. I don't know if you know. If you've heard the saying that secrets don't make friends, they make best friends. That's how the meeting after the meeting works. Is we're the two in the room who are smart enough, and they all have the wool pulled over their eyes, but I see. It's that moment where I feel powerless because there's a big problem and I don't have any ability to control it. So what do? I just complain about it, and for just a moment I feel powerful. But then later I realize that the meeting still sucks. And that problem's not going away, and the meeting after the meeting didn't fix it. Just felt good for a moment. It's that moment where though I can see the problem, I don't know how to change it. And really what it does, it just makes me more frustrated because I have a vision of how the world should be. So then not only is there's the frustration with how the world is today, there's a frustration because I know how it could be, and then I'm just even more frustrated. And for a moment I feel powerful, and then I start to feel more and more powerless. I'm like, what do I got to do? You see, friends, why we do it doesn't surprise me, and it probably doesn't surprise you. But my biggest concern, and I think why the Apostle Paul that we read about is going to give us 3 commands about complaining, is not just because that the thing itself is bad, but it's what the thing does to you. Let me be clear. I am not telling you that donuts are good or bad. I just know that unless you're 8 years old, you're going to feel bad later. And I think what happens in grumbling and complaining is it shapes us and it changes us. I think when we're in a relationship with a roommate or a spouse, and all we do is focus on what's wrong with them, what happens is all we can then see is their problems. And what we do is we become more cynical, and we just have this confirmation bias that all we do is see what they do wrong. And not only do we forget what they do right, we also forget what we're doing wrong. But it feels good. In the meeting, instead of speaking up courageously, what do? We just focus on how the boss is doing it wrong. He says, well, if I was the boss, and you want to know why you're not the boss? It's because you didn't do what you could in that moment. Because you didn't have the courage in the meeting to say there's a better way and actually get able to lead people that way. Because if you had the ability and the courage to articulate it and the leadership skills to lead people that way, you would actually be the boss and be able to be the change. But the meeting after the meeting never changes the meeting. It just changes you. It makes you more cynical and more pessimistic about the future of the team. You see, friends, and I'm so glad you're here. I don't know your story, but let me just say this as a church. When we as a church become so cynical about the world out there is going to hell in a handbasket, all it does is says, let's retreat and stay world, because we can be infected by the world, instead of no. The power of God lives inside of me, and I can be used by him to be a light in the dark place. And we just stay away. I don't want to be impacted. Or some of us, it's not the relationship of people in the church to outside the church. It's a relation of people to their own church. You go to this church and say, oh, I don't like the preaching there. I'm going to go to a new place. I don't like the music there. I'm going to go to a new place. I don't like the kids there. I don't like the coffee over there. And all you've done is find what's wrong with each different place. And what you've done, instead of church being a place where you glorify God and get filled up by him, you just become someone who's good at spectating church. And instead of jumping in and leading a small group, leading a team, leading out in worship, what you do is sit back and complain about everything everyone else does. And so every 3 to 6 months or 3 to 6 years, I got to go to another church. And it changes you. But the good news of the gospel, friends, is that even though we all have this, we all want to be smart and powerful, we all want to be able to see how to change the world, what happens is what God first does, and what we're going to see in Philippians chapter 2 today, is God first shows you how to change yourself. And then if you can then, by the power of God, change yourself, you can then change the world. So you don't have to be stuck in the cycle of complaining about your spouse, about the meeting after the meeting, and slowly but surely becoming more critical and cynical to the point where you become critical and cynical about yourself. Because some of you friends, the thing that you are most cynical about is not the team, it's not the spouse, it's when you look in the mirror and you say, man, I just wish I was a little thinner. I just wish that I was a little bit better at my job and made a little bit more money, but I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And even when you come to church, you're like, no, I want to be connected to Jesus, but I don't do it enough. And that cynicism, that critical spirit, sometimes it gets directed outwards, but sometimes it's directed inward. And what God wants to show you is there's a new way. So instead of being destroyed by cynicism, grumbling, arguing, and whining, you can be built up and shine in a whole new way. And Paul's going to show us how. So if you have your device, or if you have your Bibles, go ahead and go to Philippians chapter 2. As you're turning there, let me just give you a little recap. We're in this series on the book of Philippians, in which we start by introducing a guy named Paul, who's in jail and literally about to go to trial, and he could be executed any day. He's under house arrest, chained to a Roman guard, and in the middle of that, he says, what? Rejoice! And it's this whole idea of this sermon series. My big angle, my big question throughout this is how can we have joy when our circumstances are out of our control? Paul's teaching us how to do it, and so we can follow in his lead. So in that, last week, Dr. Dave, if you weren't here, you got to go back and watch it online. He talked about Christ who just changed and reversed the order of the world, where the world is trying to climb the pecking order to be the most powerful, the most privileged, the most important. And he says, no, Jesus came down the ladder to serve and become least and to give his life away. And it wasn't made it about others instead of himself. And if the church wants to be followers of Jesus, it's not about becoming more powerful and influential. It's becoming more of a servant and more influential that way. And now that the entire order of creation has been flipped upside down by Jesus, this is what it practically looks like. This is where the rubber hits the road, according to Paul. In Philippians chapter 2, and we'll begin reading in verse 12. Philippians chapter 2, verse 12. Therefore, because you can have joy when the world's out of your control. Therefore, because Christ turned the order of creation upside down by making it about others instead of self, and the power of God humbled himself even to the point of death. Because of that, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence when he was with them, but now so much more in my absence when he's in jail, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Work out your salvation. That is the first of 3 commands we'll look at, and we'll see how they connect together. So we'll come back to it. Verse 13. For it is God who works in you and will act will work in order to fulfill his good purpose. 14, the second command. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then if you do this, then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. He said, I will be so happy that I poured my life into you, Philippians, and now you are seeing the fruit of growing in Christ. Verse 17. But even as I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. And here's the third and final command. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. What are the 3 commands here? Let's take a look at the 3 commands, because I think they're all connected. It says the first one is work out your salvation. The second, do nothing with grumbling, arguing, and complaining. And third is to rejoice, be glad. What is the relationship of all 3 of those? Well, first, let's pick on this work out your salvation piece. If you, like me, grew up in one of those churches where you did Bible memory, I remember one of the first verses I memorized was, you are saved by grace through faith, and it's not by works. And now he's saying, work out your salvation. Whoa, wait, I thought that salvation was the free gift of God, that Jesus lived the life we should have lived and died the death we should have died so we can have new life in him, and we can't earn it. And that's true. And then when you receive this good gift, you got to work it out. Why? Because you know how it works out, right? You go, you get the weights. You're going, you're lifting, and then what happens? You start to get tired, and then the lactic acid builds up, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then what happens is your muscles literally rip because they're not strong enough to continue to do the work and hold the weight. And when they do that, what do? They actually grow so you can hold more weight. You become stronger. It's the breaking down for the purpose of building up. And what I want to tell you is, whether you realize it or not, your attitude and view of the world is working you out. And if every single rep you have is filled with negativity, that's what's going to get stronger. If every time you're like, I can't stand my spouse, they never put their underwear away. I can't stand my boss, he or she doesn't appreciate me. I can't stand my family. Every time I go for holidays, I just want to throw turkey at someone. oh my gosh, I can't believe the results of this election. And what happens? What gets stronger? Your negative, cynical spirit. But what happens when you have a shift that says, oh my spouse is a gift from God, and I've been called to love and serve them, and it's hard, and I don't think I can lift it any higher, but I'm going to keep struggling to do it. Why? Because I know that struggling to see the best in him or her is actually going to make me and our marriage stronger. And man, God, I'm struggling to trust you right now. I'm struggling. And right now, it's really hard because I see all the negative things happening around me and in the world, and I see bad things on the news all day. But God, I'm going to struggle to trust you, and I'm working out, and I'm growing my salvation. And how do you do it? It's by letting go of the negative, critical, cynical weights that you've been so trained to do by the world, by the news, by social media, by human nature. This isn't a new thing. For some of you think that complaining and whining and division is a new thing. Read the Bible. He's telling the people of God 2,000 years ago, if the people of God were struggling with it 2,000 years ago, are we any surprised that the people of God are struggling with it today? So you build the muscles to see the best in people and yourself, to see God at work. Now, some of you, I know what you're saying. I want to talk to my skeptical church people in the room. And you're like, what do you mean? I mean, the church person's like, wait, Kyle, this doesn't sound like the Bible or the gospel. All this really sounds like is positive psychology, right? Isn't this what all the people on YouTube and Instagram, and isn't this what this is about? Let me just tell you, I think there's a difference between what I want to call secular, worldly, godless positivity and spiritual positivity. And I want you to understand the difference between the two. See, because a secular positive psychology, it still works, friends. If you're here and you don't believe in Jesus, this will still work for you. It sounds something like this. It says, I don't like dinner today, but I know there's kids in Africa who are starving, so I'm going to eat my peas. It says, I can't stand going to work every day, but at least I have a job. Woo! It's, oh my gosh, my spouse, they're blah, 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 blah. Now I go talk to all my friends about it. We all agree at how bad our spouses are, and this is so much fun. And they're like, well, at least I have a spouse because people want to be, no. It says, oh, my family's driving me crazy, but at least I have them. Because some people haven't been able to have children to drive them crazy. And some people, their parents aren't alive and they're still driving them crazy. So at least I have them, woohoo. And as though I'm being silly and tongue in cheek, that actually works and is helpful. But that is a secular view of positivity in which God is not at work. So let me suggest to you a life-changing way to see the world through what I'm going to call a spiritual positivity. And it looks a little different. What happens in marriage when you're struggling to see the best in your spouse? What happens when you do it through the eyes of Jesus? What you realize is, oh my gosh, that this thing about marriage is actually not about me. It's about loving and serving my spouse the way Christ loved and served the church. And even when I was unfaithful to Christ, Christ was faithful to me. And he loved and laid down his life to me, to love me and to serve me and to build me up. And even though I was unfaithful to him, he was faithful to me and always saw the best in me no matter what. And then the thing that happens through a spiritual view is like, oh, marriage isn't about my happiness, it's about my holiness. It's me becoming more Christ-like. It's me becoming more loving, patient, kind, and generous, and laying down what I want for someone else, because that's what Jesus did on the cross. That's what we talked about last week, and you realize, oh, this is the thing that makes me more like Jesus. And what happens is instead of saying, this whole thing is pointless, let's get out of this marriage now, they're broken and I'm awesome, I'm gonna go and redo this with someone else because I can do it better. What happens is you then say, no, this person is created in the image of God, and you see what's good, you see the things that originally brought you to each other, and God reminds you of those. And then what you also realize is even though that person is imperfect, that they're still a work in progress, and the God of the universe is still working them and fixing them so you don't have to. And you look in the mirror and realize, I'm half the problem too. And I've got to grow. I got to communicate better. I got to submit better. I got to listen better. I got to spend more time talking about the things that he or she does right than he or she does wrong, and I'm just as much a part of the problem and just as much as part of the solution. But the good news is, because God is working in all this, and because it's for his glory and not for my happiness, it changes the way I see marriage. And for some of you friends, the way you see your job, most of us from a secular thing, it's like, oh, this job's good. I make money, or we get some sort of status and identity from it. That's why 90% of us do the job we do. It's either for the money or for the status. 10% is because you love your job. You are so lucky. But for the rest of the 90% of us, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Anyway, you go in and you say, oh my gosh, my boss is incompetent. And God's like, yeah, that may be true. But what does the scripture say about how you treat your boss? He says you submit to your boss the same way you submit to Christ. Why? Because if you are a believer in Jesus, you believe that there's an order. And what happens is that when you submit and honor your boss, you're really submitting and not honoring the human authority. What you do is honoring and submitting to your heavenly authority. And what happens in that moment is you realize that my job, I was placed there. Why? Not for my own money, not to be just because I love it, but my job is actually, I've been created in the image of God to work, and the purpose of work is for the blessing and the flourishing of the whole world. And so, if I believe that my job is a blessing to others, I am willing to sacrifice for the greater cause. Or, if my job is that frustrating, what I need to do is go to God and say, God, is this tension here because of my sinful nature, because of the sin out there, or because you're actually calling me to do something else? And instead of just going and complaining about it, you come before God and say, God, I believe this is what you called me to do, so empower me to do it. And if you don't want me to be here, please make it clear that I need to leave. But I'm not gonna quit because because the grass is greener somewhere else. I'm not gonna quit because I don't like it. But what I'm gonna do is come to you and say, God, are you here and you want me to suffer and submit and move through it, or are you just telling me it's time to move on? But God, you're the boss. You let me know. That, my friends, is a spiritual approach to work. Even come to our politics, friends. In a world that feels overwhelming and divided, when you come to a place that says, oh my gosh, I cannot believe who is president or who is governor or wherever you may be on that, well, you realize that they're not the ultimate authority and that Jesus is. And that somehow throughout all of human history, God has used leaders, good and evil leaders. Read the scripture throughout. God has used godly and evil leaders to accomplish his purposes. And when you realize, oh my gosh, that God is more powerful than the government, where my real trust should be is in Jesus and not in some government to save me, not in the government to issue in this new reign of goodness or whatever it may be, but I know that God is in control, and somehow in the midst of it, I can only see this little snapshot of what's going on in the world today, but God has a forever past and a forever future view, and this thing, the way he's gonna turn it around, is gonna be just like he turned things around on the cross. In the moment that it seemed like the world had lost its hope, when the God of the universe died, there was resurrection, new life, new hope, and a new way. And in the same way, like, I don't know what's going on. It feels like we're in the grave right now, but there's resurrection coming, and so it changes your narrative. You see, friends, this is what I believe a spiritual view is. But if you want to get really clear about why I think Paul is able to rejoice in all circumstances, what the greatest game changer is, it's in verse 16. Let me show you. This is the game changer. No, I'm sorry, verse 17. Look at this. Again, Paul is possibly going to be executed. And in that, he says this in verse 17. He says, but even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on a sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So I'm like, huh? That doesn't make any sense. Some of you are like, you're glad because you spilled your drink? I paid like $6.50 at Starbucks for that thing. Like, why are you excited about that? Some are like, sacrifice, what is that all about? Let me help you understand the metaphor here. We've talked about the commands. Now we're gonna look at two metaphors. What does he say here? He says, my life is poured out like a drink offering on a sacrifice. Now, again, in this world in which he's lived, he's grown up, sacrifice was his way of worship. You'd make a sacrifice to honor God. You'd make a sacrifice to put yourself in right standing with God. You'd make a sacrifice to say, thank you, God, for providing all of these things. And what I want you to imagine is in the middle of the temple or the tabernacle, if there's an animal that's being sacrificed as a part of worship to God, what they do is they take the worship to the next level by what they do is they get what's called a drink offering. Some will say it's made out of wine. It's some sort of vinegar water mix. And what happens, you can imagine this, as you take this mixture, this glass, and you pour it over the animal, which is being cooked by the flames. Anyone who's been camping is like, oh, I know what's happening here. It's gonna sizzle, it's gonna crackle, it's gonna pop, there's some alcohol, there's some water, it's gonna get smoky, and some of you are like, oh, I don't like the smell. But what this was made to do, it was made so when you smell like, it's like incense in the olden days. Some of you who were in the 70s, you know what I'm talking about. All right, I thought that was a good joke. And what Paul is saying is that my life is that glass, it's that liquid, and it's being poured out as an act of worship to God so that the life that I've lived is even more honoring to him. And what my life is all about, my life is about being a pleasing aroma to God. He says, my life is now created to be the Glade plug-in for God's glory. And I want God to look at how I live my life and say, oh, that's good. My marriage is not just about how I feel in this moment. The way I love my partner, the way I love my spouse, even for maybe the way you love your roommate, is about God saying, I'm pleased with you. And I know it's hard right now, but I love the way that you love and submit and are willing to grow and trust me to change that person and to give you the grace when it feels like you're stuck. That pleases the heart of God. When you go into work every day and say, I'm not here for the paycheck and I'm not here for the accolades. I'm here for the blessing of the world and for the glory of God, and the way I submit to and the way I treat people makes God go, oh, that smells good. That brings me glory. It's when the way everyone else has a conversation about politics and you say, yeah, I think there's some struggles, but to be honest, I don't like talking that way because it just makes me angry. Can we change the subject? I think God goes, oh, that's something I haven't smelled in a long time. And what happens is when you realize that your entire life is about glorifying God, when things are outside of your control, like this jail sentence, possible execution, your job, your marriage, your family, the world in which you have, when you realize that it's not about you anymore, but it's about God's glory, it allows you to rejoice in all things. Why? Because it's not about you. And what the scripture's teaching us, friends, is that Jesus changes and turns the whole world upside down when the God of the universe becomes a human being, dies on the cross and says, it's not even about him. God's not even living for his own glory, his own pleasure, his own satisfaction. What does he do? It says that Jesus pours his life out like a drink offering on the altar for glory of the God the Father, to be a blessing to God the Father. And Paul says, oh, if I'm going to be a follower of Jesus, it may even realize that my life is not about me, but it's about glorifying him. And that's where my greatest joy comes from. Because in that moment, I doing what I was created to do. And every time we make life about us, it never quite works. It makes us more cynical. It makes us more angry. We complain about the situation we're in instead of saying, in this moment, I can be used to bless the world and glorify God. And so God will say, that's my kid. That's my girl. That's my boy. This is what an aroma of God's glory, an aroma of praise to God in everything you do. To which some of you say, yeah, but that donut tastes good. I told you guys, I ordered 2 donuts on Wednesday. I ate both of them. Why? Because it tastes so good for just a moment. So even if you're with me and you're like, I get it. My whining, my grumbling, my complaining actually has a bigger impact on me than the people around me. Like, all right, I get it. Even if like, yeah, I want to be able to treat people differently, but I really don't know how, and I just find myself So good. Oh my gosh. If you're here, and for the next 7 days, maybe the next 21 days, you want to figure out how do you put the donut away and actually fill your heart with something that's more sustaining, more loving, more gracious, that will change you in the right direction, let me try and get there for you. So good. Hold on. I learned how to do this from my son Josiah. My son Josiah and his little brother Noah, they're 8 and 5, and they watch this TV show called Bluey. Bluey is about a cartoon dog who's blue, go figure, and all the things he does. And one day at dinner, Josiah says, let's play the Bluey game. And I'm like, oh my, I don't want to play fetch. It's dinner time. Like, let's just let me eat. I said, well, what's the Bluey game, buddy? I said, what Bluey and his family does is every day they go around the table, and at dinner, they all talk about what are the good things that happened to them that day. And I was like, oh, so we go around and it's my turn. I say something, we're done. And Josiah says, no, we keep going until we've all run out of things to do. And so the entire thing, it shifted from fighting about keep your elbows off the table and no, you can't fart on your brother and all these things. And now all of a sudden it's this new aroma that makes God go, that's a pleasing, godly, wonderful moment. Notice how I didn't say household. We're not there yet. But in this moment, Josiah taught me, and it just became a routine every day. And so even when my boys' first days of school, again, my little guy Noah, his first day back in kindergarten, after being out of school for over a year, in that moment, what happened is they learned how to find the good things even in the midst of the bad. And my kids taught me the Bluey game, you know? And maybe for you and your family, you want to play the Bluey game. Call it whatever you want. Maybe your kids don't watch Bluey. I don't know. And maybe it's at dinner time you go around the circle. Maybe that's not you. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're more introverted, and what you want to do is every day you want to write it down and keep a journal. I know some people, what they'll write it on little notes and fold them up and put them in a jar and slowly see them begin to fill and fill and fill. And so throughout those times, you see, oh, there's something there. Some of you maybe live by yourself, but you've got friends, and what you want to do is text each other. I know people who are, good best friends and long-distance relationships, that what they'll do is they'll just text each other, hey, what's the best part of your day today? And what I believe that will do is slowly begin to transform you. Now, some of you, again, I hear it, Kyle, that just sounds like positive pop psychology. That's not it at all. This is actually evolves from a spiritual discipline that St. Ignatius introduced to Christians hundreds of years ago. If some of you are like, all right, a Bluey challenge, that's some junior varsity, give me the varsity hardcore challenge, this is for you, friends. St. Ignatius, who is a leader, what he did is he taught his people the examen of Ignatius. And there was 5 things that they do as they wrapped up every day. If you're taking notes, you might want to write these things down. And after this, we'll wrap up. The daily examen of St. Ignatius has these 5 steps. Let me walk you through. It says, number 1, stop and become aware of God's presence. At the end of every day, stop. The way I do it is I take a breath. Usually takes me 2 or 3, depending on how stressful it was. And to become aware of God's presence, what I do is I take a little candle and I light the candle, and it reminds me of God's presence with me. That his love and his light and his truth and his warmth shines on me. And I just focus on the presence of God, represented by that candle, until that has greater of my attention than all the things that happen throughout the day. And just realize, I am here in the presence of God. Step 1, become aware of the presence of God. But 2 is this. 2 is review the day with gratitude. Look back on all the things that happened with your spouse, with your roommates, at work, with the neighbor, and find a way to look and see what are the good things that God is doing. Because what it does, it reshapes you to say, God is at work in every moment of every day, so let me look back and see what he was doing there. Even in that conversation that irked me, what was it that God was doing? And you begin to see, oh my gosh, God is at work throughout my day. And instead of seeing the 3 things that tick you off and prevent you from going to bed at night, you see all the ways in which God was there and practicing his presence in your life. So 1, begin with that, with God's presence. 2, review the day with gratitude. Number 3, this is going to be the hardest one for most of you. Pay attention to your emotions. Notice what it doesn't say. Judge your emotions. You been there? You go to bed at night and you're like, God, help me be grateful for that person who drives me crazy and I hope falls off a window. And then you start getting mad at yourself, like, why am I so angry? You ever been angry at yourself for being angry? why can't I just love and forgive that person and find out all those things? And then you're like, ah! No, just be aware of your emotions non-judgmentally. I feel really angry about this situation. I feel sad about this. I'm really grateful for this new opportunity. Wow, that thing surprised me. And just notice how you feel. Take an emotional scan and hold it non-judgmentally. Instead of trying to say that emotion is good or bad, just say that is what it is. Because when you realize, okay, I'm in God's presence. Second, I'm having gratitude. Third, there's awareness. Then this is the most important step to it. It's step 4. Step 4, the most important step, is to choose one feature from your day and pray about it. Maybe that feature is something that frustrated you. You said, God, I'm really frustrated and this is out of my control. God, we need to talk about this. Or maybe it's, God, you brought that person into my life today, and I'm not really sure why that happened. That didn't really make sense. God, are you trying to tell me to have a conversation with them? There was that one person at the park as we were playing with our kids. Of all the different parents out there, this one parent I felt my heart connected to. Maybe, God, are you doing something there? Is this the new friend that you're giving me in this season? Is that someone you want me to care for? Someone you've sent to care for me? God, what is going on here? And just pick one day and say, God, what are you doing in that? Or God, I need help in this because I can't do it. And it moves from 1, being aware of God's presence. 2 is being grateful for things that happen throughout the day. 3, holding, being aware of your emotions non-judgmentally. 4, praying about those. And then 5, and final, it's this. It's look forward to the next day with gratitude. Instead of saying, oh, tomorrow morning, getting the kids out the house is going to be a pain. He says, no. In that moment, God will be in the midst of that. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, we have the offsite tomorrow. That means I've got to be in that miserable meeting for 8 hours instead of 1. Oh, God, what are you doing there? God, you know I really, really am trying to avoid this hard conversation with someone I don't want to have. God, will you be there in the midst of it? And so instead of going to bed stressed about what happened or what's going to happen, you end your day by saying, God, you are involved in all things, and God, help me see what you are doing so I can join you with it. Maybe you want to do the Bluey challenge, the Bluey game. Maybe you want to do the examine of St. Ignatius, and the way it's changed my life. It's changed people's lives for hundreds of years. But why? Friends, I never want you to come to church and think, I'm just trying to tell you what to do. But what I'm more concerned with that is who you're becoming, how God shapes your inside, and how it changes you. Friends, what I want to invite you to do is see what would happen if you allowed God to change you. Because, friends, we live in a world full of darkness and division. And when it seems like the lights are going out and there's no good to be seen, I want you to remember this promise from Scripture. Look what the Apostle Paul says. He says this. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God in a warped and crooked, dark generation. Then, and only then, you will shine among them like stars in the sky. Friends, what kind of light could you be? If instead of focusing on all the things your spouse does wrong, you focus on the ways that they were doing it right and the way God was calling you to love them. Imagine how changing your attitude would allow God to shine through you to your spouse. Imagine going into the meeting after the meeting at work and everyone around the water cooler saying, can you believe that? And you say, I know this really frustrates me too, but we either need to have a conversation about how we're gonna fix it, or I need to step out. Why? Not because I'm better than you, but this stuff drives me crazy. And the whole workplace says, oh, there's another way. And in that moment, God can shine through. Or maybe, instead of looking around at the world and complaining about the housing crisis, and what the government has and has not done about homelessness. What if you said, no, instead of complaining about it, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna show up once a month and volunteer here at the Gathering Inn and see our church become a homeless shelter for others, and I wanna see God shine. What if you said, oh my gosh, in this season, of COVID, where so many families have been negatively impacted, instead of complaining about all the things that are wrong, you say, no, I'm gonna show up here Friday afternoons and work with other people who have different cognitive abilities and physical abilities, but all have the ability to come together and shine and love our community. What if when you came to church on Sunday, it wasn't, oh God, what am I gonna get out of it? But God, I wanna glorify you. I wanna bless the people around me. I want us to high five kids as they come in, and I want our church to shine. What would happen, friends, if you walked through the neighborhood and it was no longer about, can you believe what they're doing with their yard? But hey, let me help you and let God shine through you. Because friends, here's the deal. Paul says it here, that you will shine like stars in the sky. But let me be crystal clear about this. It's not the first time Scripture says this. Jesus, in his words, he says that you, not singular you, plural you, like stars in the sky, that you collectively are the light of the world. And a city on a hill cannot be hidden. He says you're a fool if you take your ability to shine and complain instead. So Life Community Church, friends and family, will you stand up, will you rise up and say, I'm living for God's glory. I want to shine a light in a dark world. And instead of complaining and making excuses, I'm going to get up, I'm going to believe in Jesus, I'm going to serve my neighbor, and I'm going to let God change me, and change the world through me. That is the invitation, friends. That is the church that God's called us to be. And that's who you can choose to become right now in this moment. As we stand and say, it's not about me, but it's all about glorifying God. Will you worship God with me this morning?
Let's sing out. I'm living with a fire burning inside of me. I'm living for the Savior, Jesus, eternally. With all that I am, Lord, I give you my heart. So let the flame shine brighter. Let your praise sing louder. I'm living with a fire burning inside of me. fire burning inside of me. I'm living for the Savior, Jesus, eternally. With all that I am, Lord, I give you my heart. So let the flame shine brighter, let your praise sing louder. So let the flame shine brighter, let your praise sing louder. Let the flame shine brighter, let your praise sing louder. I'm living with a fire burning inside of me. I'm living for the Savior, Jesus, eternally. With all that I am, Lord, I give you my heart. So let the flame shine brighter, let your praise